Everybody deals with, and everybody's just different, but I want to talk about just be honest about what goes on in my own head. Yeah. One of the greatest temptations I'm facing right now is getting lazy with my style and saying I ain't appreciating Mike's down. I serve too small a market, I need a larger target. You know, a broader audience who's spending dollars on this. And as of right now, this temptation for making some crazy statements, complaining, but I know how pride sounds. I'm everybody's favorite, maybe one of the greatest. The peak of every playlist. You'd be a lame to hate this, but the truth is it's foolish to say this. So please bear with my foolishness, cause I've concluded it's stupid to fake it. I Google my name too much, think that my fame is just, but still it ain't enough. I need to make some bucks, but not in the greedy sense. I just wanna appease the IRS and pay off our debts. I don't need to be rich, I'm fighting to be a man.
Welcome to Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. It's your old pal, Jake. We got some breaking news to cover today, first up, and then a couple of pretty telling developments for the GOP, as well as a surprise take from DL Hughley. I was going to say a 90s comedian, but I actually don't know what he's been doing in the last 20 years. I should check up on it because he had a wonderful interview about a month ago with Charlemagne the God that it has shown me that DL Hughley is somebody I have been failing to follow. Let's get, though, right to the breaking news, and that would be the release of 6 years of Donald Trump's taxes by Democrats. CNN had a video on it, and here it is. Links in the description, by the way.
House Democrats releasing 6 years' worth of former President Trump's tax returns, giving deeper insight into his personal financial situation. Right now, CNN is sifting through the hundreds of documents that were just released in the last hour. But the former president is already responding. CNN national correspondent Kristen Holmes joins me now to break it all down. Kristen, walk us through what we're learning from these tax returns. Again, the caveat being they just came out an hour ago, and there's a lot of data here, and also how the former president is responding.
So, as you said, we have a team combing through literally hundreds and hundreds of pages. But what we've been able to confirm so far is that Trump paid a very low amount of income tax in his first and last year of the presidency. We're talking about 2017, he only paid $750. 2018 and 19, it was combined $1.1 million in income tax. And 2020, it was $0. Now, that $0 is important, and here's why. What we hope that these tax returns will show is not just the raw data of the numbers, but it's actually looking at the detailed documents that were provided to give us some sort of insight into his businesses. Are they really as successful as he has said? And I talked to a number of tax experts who say that that $0, that indicates that there might have been some faltering business. Is it really just strategic accounting, which we know Trump has boasted about for years? He even said in 2016 that it was smart not to pay taxes when he was talking with Hillary Clinton about why he wouldn't release them. But is it actually business losses, which is important when you think about the political ramifications of a man who ran on the fact that he was a wealthy and therefore successful businessman. And of course, Trump is agitated about this release. He has already issued a statement. He said Democrats shouldn't have done this. And
I'm going to pause them for a second before they move on. Don't forget that that was part of his pitch to the American people. It's a nonsense pitch. The American government is not a business and should not be run like one. But his pitch was, I am good at business, so I will be good at running this country. And if it turns out just on a very basic measurement scale that he is in fact not good at business, that is a yet another lie he told in this one, being a core part of his candidacy.
He went on to say the great USA divide will now grow far worse. The radical left Democrats have weaponized everything. But remember that this is a dangerous two-way street. And he released a video last week as part of his 2024 campaign, essentially calling on Republicans to start looking into Biden's finances and to Biden's family. So that's what he's referring to there.
Don't threaten me with a good time. Yes. Dangerous two-way street. What exactly is he suggesting there? I'm watching some of these clips raw, as in I've read articles surrounding them, but not watched the clips themselves. I like doing that so I can give you a live reaction. But of course, I have to load them up, so I do see part of them. But yeah, please make it a law that everybody's got to release their taxes if they're running for government. We should know what your finances are. We should know who you owe money to. We should know who owes you money. He's saying it's a dangerous two-way street. There's nothing dangerous. It is a two-way street. He's correct. I would love, for example, for Nancy Pelosi to have her taxes combed through in fine detail, because she has too much money for somebody that has held the job she has held for as long as she's held. This is true of basically everybody on the national political level. Their bank accounts are too big for their what they should be given their paychecks.
Talks about a two-way street.
And of course, the GOP is taking over the House in mere days. They're going to have a lot of oversight. We also know that House Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal put out a statement this morning after this came out. What did he say? Of course, he's the Democrat.
Right. And he said, Congress serves as a check on the executive branch, and our committee is entrusted with oversight of our revenue system. A president is no ordinary taxpayer. They hold power and influence unlike any other American. And with great power comes greater responsibility. And of course, the important thing to note here is that Trump set an enormous amount, he broke an enormous amount of precedent when he was running for president and then was president. He became the first president in modern history not to release his taxes. This was
for clarity, the last president that didn't do that was Nixon. Show you the company this guy's in. Yeah, he's the first president since Richard Nixon to not do that.
He chose to do. And on top of that, this is something that for decades he has shielded from the public. And one other thing I want to quickly touch on that we're looking for here is foreign entities.
Ooh, okay, so we're going to get to that in a moment. But you should understand why Trump is so obsessed with his image. It is, I'm sure it's got a lot to do with vanity, but it's also because the only reliable way he has actually legitimately generated money has been to sell the rights to his name. So his appearance of being rich is how he has gained money. He does that through licensing his name onto properties, or rather he did, since he so publicly shit the bed as president. It hadn't been working so well. But he did run a scheme where he would put his name onto a property, and his name, for people that were gullible, equated to fancy. And even though he had nothing else to do with the property other than it was called Trump whatever, he would get 10% of the income for that property. So if he no longer has the appearance of a rich guy, that doesn't have any more value. So of course he was hiding his true wealth because it wasn't going to live up to his reputation.
Bank accounts. That's something.
Now we go into foreign ties.
Something we're going through these additional documents for. Does he have foreign bank accounts? Are there any foreign-owned businesses? The reason that's important is because you remember this was a big topic of conversation during his entire presidency. So that is something we're going to be looking at closely as we go through these hundreds of pages.
Right, a lot of data there to sort through. All right, Kristen, stay with us. We want to talk a little bit more about this, but we also want to bring in CNN political analyst Margaret Talib.
Just, I'm sure you get this, but to absolutely underline it, if he's in business with foreign entities, that means his decision-making as leader of our country is going to be affected. That means when he's dealing with those foreign entities, like, say, Russia, China, the sort of folks that we sometimes have to get tough with, those are going to be deeply affected by him not wanting to affect his own finances. The fact that he appears to have been hiding dealings with foreign governments should be of concern to you.
Managing editor for Axios, and Stephen Rosenthal, senior fellow at Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center. Great to have you all here. Margaret, let's start first with you. As I mentioned, the GOP taking control of the House in just mere days, timing everything here. The Democrats releasing these at the last minute. They kind of could.
The New York Democrats
we know that Republicans are planning for a lot of oversight investigations, but is there any indication you think that they're going to try to push back on this specifically?
I think they're going to message around it, and we've already seen that. But Republicans actually have an opportunity right now. If they want to, they can push to put this in legislation so that future presidents, including Democratic presidents, will be required to release this. That's not where their messaging is at right now, and it might never get there. Are they going to use this to try to require more disclosure, not only from Joe Biden, but from everyone in Joe Biden's family? Probably. But the truth of the matter is there's a difference between running for president of the United States and being related to somebody or in somebody's family or even a candidate for other kinds of offices has long been what Americans expect. And the messaging from Republicans so far has been that if they can do this to Donald Trump, they can do this to you. Like the ordinary person will somehow have all of their voluminous, tax information revealed. It's, first of all, simply not true. Second of all, there's no interest in making an ordinary member of the public's tax returns public for the world to see. And third of all, if you did, what would it show? Most people can file an easy return. Many people who earn a fraction of what Donald Trump's holdings are paid much more in taxes in 2020, to the best of everyone's knowledge. And so it is, so far, the messaging is kind of a scare tactic, but it's really not on point. There is a completely different standard, and the polling shows that huge majority, somewhere between 2/3 and 4 out of 5 Americans, say that former President Trump's tax returns should be made public.
I am so glad to hear corporate media finally learning how to talk about this stuff honestly. Going right to the polling is important because you don't want to give the impression that what Republicans are talking about are the concerns of the average citizen. They simply are not, and they have never been. I don't see any average folks, anybody that makes less than $2 million a year, having a problem if you take out the prep work the GOP does to rush to their Fox News propaganda arm and coach their people ahead of time. If you get to somebody before they've heard a GOP rant and just ask them, should politicians have to show their taxes? You're going to get a yes. Obviously, yes. You want to know if they're compromised or not. And you can be compromised without having done anything wrong. But you ought to know who's in your politicians' pockets.
Well, and it is the precedent. And to your point, the average American is not running for president or the president. There are very few Americans doing that. Stephen, can you explain some of the things you'd be looking for that would be, say, a blockbuster revelation beyond what we've already learned in bits and pieces, or key nuggets that could be gleaned from this?
Well, we just got the documents posted, and I've been looking closely at.
I just want to say real quick, if you want to learn how to read media easier, every time you get somebody on with a bad sounding mic like that, get ready for good information. That's somebody who was worth bringing on, even though they don't normally do this kind of thing. So get ready for, and apparently I'm going to just assume it, senior fellow there, Urban Brookings. Anyway, get ready for somebody with an interesting take.
Foreign accounts and foreign sources of income in the last hour. What strikes me immediately is that
talked over that.
Closely at.
Going back a little bit, here we go.
Well, we just got the documents posted, and I've been looking closely at foreign accounts and foreign sources of income in the last hour. What strikes me immediately is that in 2015, 16, and 17, Donald Trump had foreign accounts in the UK, Ireland, China, and also looks like St. Thomas, ST. But then in
That's a tax
2018,
haven.
only UK. And 2019 and 20, only UK. And so that's one of the things I'm looking at. And we know from last month's trial of the Trump Organization in New York that Trump's accountants, tax accountants, said that his presidential returns had to be squeaky clean. So I suspect that things got cleaned up some later on.
Remember, this guy,
And it is
this guy selected to head the IRS, a fella who had put out an opinion article in California. He was a California tax lawyer. He put out an opinion article that said that Trump shouldn't have to release his taxes. And so then Trump made him the head of the IRS. Republicans gonna Republican.
interesting, and that's a little bit of what Kristen was talking about earlier too. Is that you were saying that it's going to be key about foreign entities. Where were the investments? Where was the money going? What foreign entities was he involved with? We also know that President Trump was supposed to have a mandatory audit from the IRS, and he didn't have one 3 out of 4 years. He was always so paranoid around his taxes, as you alluded to earlier. Do you think?
He didn't have one 3 out of 4 years, and he only got one once House Democrats inquired with the IRS about the audits. They asked, where are we with these? And on that very day, the very day of the inquiry, is when the IRS started to do them. These are mandatory, as in the IRS didn't have a choice as to whether or not they could do them. They were required to do them. Mandatory by policy, not by law. That is hugely important. The giving away, not giving away, but the revealing of taxes has been required by tradition, has been required by decency, has been required by common sense, but Trump was able to get away with not doing it because it was not required by law. So this, going back to the beginning of the clip, this Republican threat to say, oh, if they can do it to anybody. Yes, that's exactly what we want. Make it law. All these things that are policy but not law, meaning there's not a enforceable arm of it. They need to be made into law. And we should be looking at every stage of politics where we have policy propping up our system, where what we need is law with consequences written in to them.
That there's any appetite to codify this into law from it would have to come through Congress, but also, doesn't this just speak to just the broader paranoia of Trump's feelings around his money and his taxes?
Yeah, and I do think this goes to politics in general. When you're thinking about Trump, we can always say, is his base going to turn on him for everything that happens, right? Any kind of glitch in the road. And is this something that's going to do that? Probably not. But when you look at Trump, the things that he really cares about are his image and the narrative that he built for the last several decades before he ran for president, before he even was considering that level of politics. This is something that he sold his entire life on, the Trump Hotel. It was his brand, and it's associated with success and wealth. So that is part of why there have been rumors for decades around New York that he might not be as wealthy as he seemed. In fact, I talked to some of his closest associates back from those days who said they believed he would never run for president because it would be too much financial scrutiny, and they just didn't believe that because he is so private and so invested in not sharing this information publicly that he just couldn't get through that and run for president. Of course, obviously he did, and he did not release his taxes and broke precedent there. But yes, this is a big part of how he even ran back in 2016. He said that if he could be the successful of a businessman, then he could successfully run a nation. And that's why we're looking so closely at just how successful those businesses were. And that's why it's so interesting when you look at the fact that, yes, some of this is strategic accounting. This is something that people who have this kind of money and these kind of resources do. They claim these large losses, and then they carry over millions and millions of dollars. We already know he carried over $105 million in 2015, $73 million. These are losses that he carries over in order to offset his income tax and pay less money. But when you look at that 2020 number, did that actually come from those offsets, or was this a COVID number coming at that time where businesses were severely impacted? And so it's just going to be interesting to paint a picture of this, because we only know one narrative, and it has been Donald Trump's narrative that he is a wealthy, successful businessman, and that is what gives him this power and this strength in this country.
The full clip is something worth checking out. Do it with your critical left eyes. Understand that you are hearing corporate media for the first time addressing these things seriously, and so it's difficult for them. Also, this is a piece of breaking news. I got to commend everybody up there. Kristen Holmes. These three folks are unfamiliar to me, but I'll be watching for more from them. CNN does not always nail it, but I feel like today they did, and it was a pretty astute assessment of Trump's taxes. These 6 years of taxes you're going to hear more about in the next couple of days, because a lot of questions get raised, particularly when you see that he had apparently a bank account in China, and that went away during his presidency. There are questions to answer there. All right. So the last I had heard of DL Hughley was during a pretty funny sitcom, but it from the 90s, early 2000s. Had a laugh track. It was the standard fare. And then saw a clip of him on Charlemagne the God's show talking about Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker is already eyeballing old news as far as this insane modern news cycle goes. But Hughley's discussion of him brings up a point which has been relevant for years and will be so, unfortunately, long into the future. The clip itself is not that long. I'm just going to get you right to it.
Like, Herschel Walker's everything they hate about black people. He raises children, doesn't take care of them, he lies, incompetent, he's ignorant. When white people from that party love black people, it's because they're obedient. It is. They never pick remarkable black men. None of the black men they've ever dealt with will ever be famous for anything. Like, if Clarence Thomas is if he didn't...
Ben Carson.
In his profession.
Yeah.
But politically, they're unremarkable. They're not going to get a school or a stamp or a street.
You telling me Tim Scott not going to get a street in South Carolina?
No. They pick black people the way most people pick dogs. For a big, strong black dude, we don't need your strength, we need your compliance. We need for you to do what we say. So his aesthetic, of course he looked like a Greek god, but he has to do, the principle, the contract we have is you gonna do what we tell you to do, and you're not gonna ask no questions.
Tell him DL. Yes, sir, that is, I mean, I don't even have that much to add. Charlemagne the God brought up he objected to a point there, and I think rightly so. If you're not familiar with Ben Carson's career before politics, he is, that I'm aware of, he's the only doctor that was famous for just being he was a surgeon, a brain surgeon, and he was famous for his day job. Dr. Oz was famous for being a doctor on TV and offering insane medical advice, but no, Ben Carson was famous for his skill as a surgeon. That's how good he was. But DL Hughley brings it right back, and I feel like nails it, because he's saying in the context of politics, Ben Carson didn't do anything in politics that would have justified the place he was put in the Republican Party, except go along with everything they said. That's it. Herschel Walker is like a caricature. It kind of hurts to see, man. Yeah, I didn't know DL Hughley was into politics. I don't know if he's got a show. I don't know if he's got a podcast. But I'll tell you, I'm going to be looking out for him because I don't think I've heard anybody break down a political problem in the USA so concisely, accurately, and live. It was in a back and forth interview. That wasn't a prepared speech. My gosh. So yeah, I'm gonna be looking out for DL Hughley. The where I found the clip is in the description, and I'll certainly be giving Mr. Hughley a little more attention in the future. Going right back to bumming you out. So the GOP has a real problem with extremists. Well, America has a problem with right-wing extremists, and the GOP is the cause of that problem. They know it, and they have literally covered this up for years and years and years. Back in the George W. Bush administration, the Department of Homeland Security put out a report talking about the biggest threats to America. And right at the top, number one was global warming. Number two was right-wing extremism. And I believe 1 year when they put out this report in the Bush administration, this is how far back it goes, right-wing extremism was number one. This was buried. And to the shame of all of us, it was buried both by corporate media, which did not apparently want to anger the right, and most importantly by Republicans. Well, it's getting harder and harder for the GOP to do that these days because we are getting more and more terrorist attacks. Once upon a time, these people were terrified of foreign terrorist attacks. If only they knew the truth. Here is a compilation of the GOP trying to distract from LGBTQ plus attacks, or attacks on those people.
Today's hearing is but an attempt to blame Republicans for the horrendous acts of violence.
This is a blame Republicans so we don't have to take responsibility for our own defund the police and soft on crime policies.
I think, one, if we look at the type of people committing the crimes, the breakdown of the family. And, of course, we have people here who've stood with Black Lives Matter, who initially was opposed to that.
Just to be clear, that was a hearing this month on the topic of anti-LGBTQ violence. And yet, true to form, Republicans were eager to play the victim card and the change the subject card and the anything but let's solve a problem card, blaming the rise in violence on crime, on defund the police, on migrants crossing the border, and on the breakdown of the family. We're back with our panel. Janelle, what is the, as a student of some of these structural problems, how do you get to the beginning of combating this line where the ideology triggers violence, or the ideology seeps into the mind of someone who's unstable and capable of violence, which seems like a very complicated, very intricate, and very sort of all hands on deck mission. How do you begin to tackle that if again, you've got this refusal to even look in the mirror and say that as a country we have a problem with extremism and its capacity to spill into violence?
Nicole, the first thing we do in intelligence and homeland security is we look at the threat environment. I point you to a Southern Poverty Law Center report that indicates that from 2008 to last year, anti-government groups increased by 300%. And so whereas we had in 2008 about 150, now we're looking at about 500. The threat environment is rich right now for this type of activity, violent extremism. It comes from, obviously, politicians. It comes from conservative media.
Real quick, that guy, I almost paused it to chastise him, but he saved it right at the end there. They're so used to not saying the GOP. He said politicians, not right-wing politicians. There's not Democrats that are causing these issues. I don't like the Democrats, but they are not responsible for any domestic terrorism. The Republican Party is. But I'll let him go because he's nailing it.
But it also comes from the internet. It comes from the dark and deep web, sites we've heard about, the lack of content moderation. And the fact of the matter is, and I hate to say this, hate sells in this country. And many see the division of America as an enterprise that can gain them either votes or clicks or cash. And we get.
Sorry, my little chuckle there was I was just remembering Sam Cedar absolutely smoking that one guy who is another promoter of terrorism. Can't even remember his name, but he goes, "Oh no, Sam Cedar, what a nightmare." Amazing. Anyway,
don't have to look that far past someone like Nick Fuentes and some of these other people who are in this threat environment that are stoking this type of hate. We have ignored the domestic violent and domestic extremism problem for many, many years.
Yes.
And now it's coming back to bite us. And it's coming back to bite us because they are enabled now by technology, particularly the social media aspect. But also you have people who are so-called influencers who are stoking this. The last thing I'll say is that
Andrew Tate arrested yesterday, not terrorism, but for human trafficking. Steven Crowder, now that I can remember his name, I want to pick on him with his stupid holsters, all his little hint. Yes, absolutely. And let's call him like we sees him, Tucker Carlson, on air every night. He is a stochastic terrorist.
The part that I find interesting, once again, as a student and as a professor of Homeland Security, is this constant friction between security and safety and privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. There's never any equilibrium. And so most of these hate groups, they hide behind the First Amendment until they go operational. And there's a very limited time between the time that they decide to go operational and they become violent to interdict them. They also hide behind the Second Amendment.
Yes.
And these groups for decades have amassed weapons and tactics, techniques, and procedures that make them very, very lethal now.
Within my own state, the okay state of Michigan, the Wolverine Watchman, we just had a conviction of the leader. He got 16 years in prison, followed by the conviction of Barry Croft, another member. He got 19 and a half years in prison. What for? They were going to kidnap and kill the governor of Michigan. That was their plan. It's not a joke, folks. There's nothing different about these terrorists than the Taliban. They are, other than I suppose, the strength of the government in terms of numbers, in terms of literally how many guns and bullets there are, that opposes them. It's Al Qaeda. It really. The Republican Party is nothing but a bunch of criminals, and there is different kinds of criminals within them, but all of them seek to do evil. You don't, on the national level, I cannot think of a Republican politician whose policy set has a benefit for their constituents. The closest you can come to a Republican politician at the national level who is not straight up just robbing America would be somebody who is talking about irrelevant things. The way they get votes is to fire up culture wars. But if you spend your entire career telling your constituents that the problems they face come from another culture of people, you are going to inevitably get somebody who grows up in that environment and says, I'm going to do something about it. Click, clack. That's what you're going to get.
Yeah, it's the First Amendment while they're talking about it, the Second Amendment while they're planning it, and the right to privacy that they don't see in reproductive rights when they're operational. It's amazing. Pete Strzok, I want to read to you some revelations from the January 6th report that we haven't gotten to yet here on this show. It's not just people willing to tell the truth and if they see something, say something. Mitch McConnell, of all people, was on the phone with Donald Trump's national security advisor warning that ex-military represented a threat to President-elect Joe Biden. Let me read some of that reporting to you. 2 days after pro-Trump rioters attacked the U.S. Capitol, then National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien got a call from Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell and an aide who asked him to look into something he'd been hearing. Retired military personnel sympathetic to Trump might be preparing to prevent Joe Biden's inauguration. Quote, he was concerned that there were reports that there were retired military personnel who were sympathetic to the president and might be organizing, O'Brien said in the interview. McConnell's own national security aide, Robert Karam, was on the call as well and raised similar concerns about Navy SEALs, O'Brien said. That's from reporting in Politico about the O'Brien transcripts being part of this final report. I know the right went nuts when the new defense secretary and Pentagon leaders sought to examine extremism in the military. And I wonder, Pete, what you make of our ability to at least shine a light on it as a first step to combating it.
Well, Nicole, that episode with McConnell is absolutely chilling, and I think it is an area that I'm really concerned about radicalization within the military ranks and within law enforcement as well. But you're absolutely right. I mean, when you look at the last National Defense Authorization Act that was just passed, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, there were several measures, maybe 6 or 7 measures that had funding for the Department of Defense to do studies and to look at the phenomena of radicalization within the officer corps, within the enlisted corps.
Okay. Really focus in on this. He's saying there was budget in there for studies. The right wing wants, above all else, knowledge suppressed, facts not found, because they know the facts look bad for them. They know that when you lay out cause and effect of their policy, of their behavior, you will see a nightmare scenario. They refused to let the CDC collect data on gun violence. They blocked that. They take every opportunity they can to block the collection of knowledge because they don't want you to have it. Let's hear him say that exact thing in fancier words.
Figure out how big the problem was and what might be done to combat it. But because it has become such a political issue, all of those measures were stripped out of it. It almost zeroed out all the funding.
Because it has become a political issue? No. This dude comes from the school of making things vague so you're not offensive to people that frankly need to be offended. No, it's not become a political issue because Republicans blocked it, because Republicans are afraid of what it's going to say, because they know already. They know.
That had been proposed for even just taking a look at the problem. to figure out whether or not it was an issue, how broad an issue it was, and what might be done. We're not even going to give money to take the first look at that. And the issue at the end of the day, I mean, I completely agree with Danelle that there is a profit motive behind it, but there's also a political motive. I mean, we had Marjorie Taylor Greene in her text, I think Mark Meadows talking about all the QAnon people saying, these are my people. There are people right now in Congress who have as their constituents who put them into power adherents of QAnon and some of these other extraordinarily dangerous groups who have violent ideologies at their fringes. And so it's not just a profit issue, it's a political power issue as well. And before we do any work to look at this, you're going to have some sort of political will to do it. And I just don't see that coming out of the Republican Party, at least not for the next 2 years.
It will never come out of the Republican Party. There needs to be no more Republican Party. We have plenty of conservative Democrats, and we have Democrats that would welcome refugees from the Republican Party into their ranks gladly. Ted Lieu is one of them. Ted Lieu, I think, actually has a soul, but the rest of them, say Mitch McConnell, they also would be welcomed, even though they shouldn't be. My point being, there is a place for conservatives to go in American politics, and that is the Democratic Party. It is largely a conservative party right now. The leadership are anything but progressive. They are in the pockets of corporations. Nancy Pelosi, who is stepping down but was most recently in leadership, she did everything in her power to allow politicians to engage in shady stock trades. My point is, conservatives have somewhere to go, but the Republican Party, its infrastructure, its current leadership, they got to go. They are straight up criminals. They are running cover for, they are covering for domestic terrorists. Their propaganda arm in Fox News, and that's not an exaggeration, by the way. You can look up Roger Ailes. They encourage domestic terrorism. So what can you do? What can you actually do about this? It's easier than you might think. This is the most common solution I offer. It is because it is both easy to do and it is effective. Contact your representative. You just heard that studies on extremism in the military were suppressed by the GOP. Go to house.gov. I just realized I'll put the link in the re-upload of this, but go to house.gov, find your representative. There will be an email and a phone number. Pick one. Either email them or call them. Tell them you want a study done about extremism in the military, because we do not want another bin Laden. That dude was armed and trained by the USA. We don't want to be doing that again. Contact your representative. It's as simple as that. Make this part of the conversation regularly. My rule of thumb for this, do it once a week. If it's a topic you genuinely care about, do it once a week. There are not that many people that take the time to contact their representatives, and the people that do tend to be right-wingers. This needs to become a habit of the left. Contact your representative. House.gov, find your representative. Sorry to end it on a Debbie Downer, but the good news is you do have more power than they let you think you have. So odds are, if we as a political group make it a habit to be louder, make it a habit to be more seen. And we take what you're doing right now, following the news, following politics, and we add just a little bit of effort. We make these problems that are the average American's problems into the problems of our representatives, because they got to hear about it from us all the time. If we do that, I think you'll find that the country starts behaving the way you want it to. This is Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. This has been your old pal Jake. I'll see you next time.
Taught to be nice, ain't about winning, don't talk to me twice. I don't play dice, I'll make a move on the board, it's precise. The fuck is the price? I took a fiddle and dipped it in ice. I took a call and now I'm on a flight. Crew heading east, got a booking tonight. First stop is Atlanta, I got breakfast plans at the Waffle House. Next up is Miami, I'm hitting South Beach, fuck we talking about. Show out, we in Brooklyn, I'm on Flatbush and we rocking out. Then a red eye to Los Angeles, got a